Imagine waking up alone in the middle of the American wilderness. Your bones are broken. Your back has been torn open. Your scalp hangs loose. Your body is covered in deep claw wounds. You have no horse, no rifle, very little food, and the nearest settlement is more than 200 miles away through forests, rivers, mountains, and territory filled with dangers. Most people would have died within hours. But one man refused. His name was Hugh Glass. Nearly 2 centuries later, his story remains one of the greatest survival tales ever recorded. It has inspired books, documentaries, and the Academy Award-winning film The Revenant. Yet the true story is every bit as astonishing as the legend. This is the real history of Hugh Glass, the frontiersman who crawled back from the edge of death. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding Hugh Glass is that historians know surprisingly little about his early life. Most sources agree that he was born around 1783, possibly in Pennsylvania, although no definitive birth record has been found. Unlike many famous historical figures, Glass left behind few personal writings. Much of what we know comes from newspaper reports, memoirs, military records, and accounts written by people who knew him or heard the story soon after it happened. Because of this, separating fact from legend is an important part of understanding his life. Some later stories claim he was captured by pirates in the Gulf of Mexico, or lived for years among Native American communities before becoming a trapper. While parts of these stories may contain elements of truth, historians disagree about how much can be verified. What is certain is that by the early 1820s, Hugh Glass had become an experienced frontiersman. He knew how to hunt, track animals, navigate rivers, build shelter, and survive in one of the harshest environments in North America. Those skills would soon be tested beyond imagination. To understand Hugh Glass's story, we must first understand the world he lived in. In the early 19th century, the American frontier stretched across vast regions that were still largely unexplored by European Americans. The Rocky Mountains, Great Plains, and Upper Missouri River were home to diverse Native American nations, abundant wildlife, and a growing fur trade. At the time, beaver pelts were among the most valuable commodities in the world. In Europe and the eastern United States, felt hats made from beaver fur were fashionable and highly profitable. As demand increased, trappers pushed farther into remote wilderness. The work was dangerous. Harsh winters, wild animals, accidents, disease, and conflicts over territory all threatened survival. Yet many young men accepted the risk in hopes of earning a fortune. Among them was Hugh Glass. In 1823, businessman and military veteran General William Henry Ashley organized one of the most ambitious fur-trading ventures in American history. Ashley recruited skilled frontiersmen to travel up the Missouri River and establish trading posts deep in the wilderness. His advertisement famously called for 100 enterprising young men. Many of these recruits would later become legendary mountain men, including Jim Bridger, Jedediah Smith, Thomas Fitzpatrick, and others who helped explore the American West. Hugh Glass joined the expedition as an experienced hunter and trapper. The journey was anything but easy. Travel along the Missouri River exposed the expedition to unpredictable weather, difficult terrain, and occasional attacks during periods of conflict. Every day required constant vigilance. Even experienced frontiersmen understood that a single mistake could prove fatal. For modern audiences, survival in the wilderness may seem like an adventure. For Hugh Glass and his companions, it was daily life. Food had to be hunted, water had to be located, shelter had to be built before nightfall. Weapons required constant maintenance. Illness or injury could quickly become life-threatening because medical care was hundreds of miles away. Even crossing a river carried enormous risks. Horses could drown, equipment could be lost, cold water could lead to exhaustion or hypothermia. Every decision mattered. The frontier rewarded preparation and punished carelessness. Glass's years of experience made him one of the expedition's most capable outdoorsmen. Soon, those skills would become his only hope. By late summer 1823, members of the expedition were traveling through what is now South Dakota near the Grand River. The region was home to one of North America's most formidable predators, the grizzly bear. Adult grizzlies can weigh more than 600 pounds, though some grow even larger. They possess immense strength, powerful jaws and claws, capable of inflicting catastrophic injuries. Modern wildlife experts stress that most grizzly bears avoid humans whenever possible. However, a mother bear protecting her cubs can become extremely dangerous if she perceives a threat. This is precisely the situation Hugh Glass unknowingly entered. As Glass moved ahead of his companions to scout the area, he suddenly encountered a female grizzly bear with her cubs. The bear charged almost instantly. There was little time to react. Historical accounts describe a violent struggle. Glass attempted to defend himself, but the bear's sheer size and power overwhelmed him. The animal knocked him to the ground. It bit him repeatedly. Its claws tore through his back, shoulders, and legs. The attack left deep wounds across much of his body. According to contemporary accounts, members of the expedition rushed to help. Working together, they managed to kill the bear before it could finish the attack. But when the dust settled, Hugh Glass lay motionless. His injuries were horrifying: broken bones, severe lacerations, massive blood loss. Many believed he could not possibly survive. Some companions reportedly expected him to die within hours. The expedition now faced an impossible decision. Glass was still alive, but barely. He could not walk. He could not travel. Moving him slowed the entire expedition through dangerous territory. Every extra day increased the risk to everyone else. General William Henry Ashley offered payment for 2 volunteers, willing to remain behind with the dying man until the end. 2 members of the expedition accepted: John Fitzgerald and the young frontiersman Jim Bridger. Their assignment seemed simple: stay with Hugh Glass, comfort him if possible, and bury him after he died. No one imagined that Hugh Glass's greatest battle had not been against the grizzly bear. It was only about to begin. When the grizzly attack ended, Hugh Glass was barely conscious. His companions examined his injuries and believed he could not survive. His back had been deeply torn. His legs were badly injured. He had lost an enormous amount of blood. Simply breathing caused him pain. The expedition could not remain in one place indefinitely. Supplies were limited, and the group faced the constant risk of attack while traveling through unfamiliar territory. General William Henry Ashley offered extra pay to 2 volunteers, willing to stay with Glass until he died and then give him a proper burial. Those volunteers were John Fitzgerald and Jim Bridger. For several days, they waited beside the wounded trapper. Glass remained alive, but his condition showed little sign of improving. Exactly what happened next has been debated for nearly 2 centuries. The most widely accepted historical accounts state that Fitzgerald and Bridger eventually believed they faced immediate danger if they remained where they were. Some reports suggest they feared an attack from nearby Native American groups. Others emphasize the growing risk to the expedition and the practical difficulty of staying longer. Convinced that Glass would not survive, the 2 men departed. Historical accounts generally agree they left behind only limited supplies. When they returned to the expedition, they reported that Hugh Glass had died. To everyone else, the story seemed complete. The mountain man had been killed by a grizzly. No one expected to see him again. At some point, Hugh Glass regained consciousness. The silence around him was overwhelming. The men who had stayed with him were gone. His rifle was gone. Much of his equipment was gone. He could barely move. The nearest settlement lay hundreds of miles away. There was no doctor, no rescue party, no easy path to safety. For most people, this would have been the end. Glass made a different decision. He would try to survive. Standing was impossible. Walking was impossible. Historical accounts describe Glass beginning his journey by crawling. Every movement caused intense pain. To reduce the risk of infection, some accounts state that he allowed insects to feed on dead tissue within his wounds, a practice that, while disturbing, is known to have removed decaying flesh in certain circumstances. Historians note that details of this part of the story are difficult to verify completely, but it has become one of the most discussed elements of his survival. Glass also relied on the natural environment. He searched for water whenever possible. He rested in the shade during the hottest parts of the day. Every meter gained was an achievement. His progress was measured not in miles, but in determination. Without a firearm, hunting large game was unrealistic. Glass adapted. He ate whatever he could safely find: wild berries, edible plants, roots. Occasionally, small animals or food left behind by predators. He knew which plants could sustain him and which could be dangerous. Years spent as a trapper had taught him lessons that now meant the difference between life and death. He also sought shelter whenever storms approached. Rock overhangs, fallen trees, and natural depressions in the landscape offered some protection from wind and rain. The wilderness that had nearly killed him also provided the resources he needed to continue. Most historians estimate that Glass eventually traveled roughly 200 miles, about 320 kilometers, toward Fort Kiowa, a trading post on the Missouri River. The exact route remains uncertain. There are no maps drawn by Glass himself, and later accounts differ on some details. What is not disputed is the extraordinary distance he covered while recovering from devastating injuries. The journey took weeks. Each sunrise meant another day of uncertainty. Each night meant finding enough shelter to survive until morning. His determination became as important as his physical strength. Historical sources indicate that Glass did not complete the entire journey completely unaided. Accounts describe him receiving assistance from Native American communities during parts of his recovery. These interactions are important because they remind us that survival on the frontier often depended on cooperation as well as individual endurance. The precise details vary among historical accounts, but most agree that assistance from others played a role in helping him continue his journey. This is one example of how the real story is often more nuanced than later legends. After weeks of unimaginable hardship, Hugh Glass finally reached Fort Kiowa. Those who saw him could scarcely believe he had survived. The man who had been left for dead had crossed hundreds of miles of wilderness. His wounds slowly began to heal. Although recovery would take much longer, the most difficult part of the journey was finally over. News of his survival spread quickly across the frontier. The story seemed almost impossible. Many listeners wondered whether it had been exaggerated. Yet enough contemporary accounts appeared that the survival of Hugh Glass soon became one of the best-known frontier stories of the era. When Hugh Glass arrived at Fort Kiowa, many of the people who saw him were stunned. Word had already spread through the frontier that he had died after the grizzly attack. Yet here he was, alive, thin, exhausted, scarred, but alive. For weeks, Glass slowly recovered his strength. His wounds gradually closed, though many would leave permanent scars. The story of his survival spread rapidly among trappers, traders, and soldiers along the Missouri River. On the American frontier, tales often grew larger with each retelling. But even stripped of exaggeration, the facts were remarkable. A man left for dead had crossed hundreds of miles of wilderness with devastating injuries and lived to tell the story. Glass never forgot what had happened after the bear attack. According to historical accounts, he believed John Fitzgerald had abandoned him and taken valuable equipment, including his rifle. Once he was physically able to travel again, Glass began searching for the men who had left him behind. His first goal was to find Jim Bridger. Bridger was still very young at the time, around 17 years old. When the two finally met, historical accounts suggest that Glass chose not to seek violent revenge. Some historians believe Glass understood that Bridger had acted under the influence of the older and more experienced Fitzgerald. Others argue that Glass simply wanted to move forward. Whatever his reasoning, Bridger survived the encounter. In later years, Jim Bridger himself became one of the most famous mountain men in American history, helping explore vast areas of the American West. Glass remained determined to confront John Fitzgerald. Eventually, he learned that Fitzgerald had joined the United States Army. This changed everything. Attacking a serving soldier could have resulted in severe punishment, regardless of the circumstances. Historical accounts generally agree that Glass confronted Fitzgerald but did not kill him. Instead, he reportedly demanded the return of the rifle or compensation for the property that had been taken. The exact details differ among surviving accounts. Some versions describe Fitzgerald returning equipment. Others suggest Glass accepted that legal or military authority limited his options. What historians broadly agree upon is this: the famous image of Hugh Glass hunting Fitzgerald across the wilderness and killing him is fiction. That dramatic ending became popular through later novels and films. The historical evidence tells a different story. For many people, surviving such an ordeal would have ended any desire to return to the wilderness, not Hugh Glass. After recovering, he resumed life as a trapper and frontiersman. He continued working along the upper Missouri River, joining expeditions and navigating some of the most challenging landscapes in North America. Life on the frontier remained dangerous: harsh winters, powerful rivers, wild animals, disease, conflicts over territory. Every journey carried risk. Yet Glass continued doing the work he knew best. His remarkable survival had not removed danger from his life. It had simply become another chapter in it. In 1833, roughly a decade after the famous bear attack, Hugh Glass's life came to an end. Historical records indicate that he and two companions were killed during an attack while trapping near the Yellowstone River in what is now Montana. As with many frontier events of the era, surviving details are limited, and accounts differ on exactly how the incident unfolded. What is clear is that the man who had survived one of history's most extraordinary wilderness ordeals ultimately died while continuing the demanding work of a mountain man. He was about 50 years old. In 2015, Hugh Glass's story reached millions through the film The Revenant, starring Leonardo DiCaprio. The film introduced a new generation to Glass's incredible survival. However, it also changed several historical details for dramatic effect. For example, the film portrays Glass's son as a central character. Historians have found no reliable evidence that Hugh Glass had the son depicted in the movie. The film presents an extended revenge story culminating in a violent confrontation. Historical sources indicate that Glass did not kill John Fitzgerald. Several locations, timelines, and characters were altered or combined to serve the narrative. These changes are common in historical films. The core survival story is rooted in documented history, but many surrounding events were adapted for cinema. Over the years, Hugh Glass has become a legendary figure. Some stories claim he survived entirely without assistance. Historical evidence suggests he likely received help during portions of his journey, particularly after reaching people along the frontier. Other accounts exaggerate the exact distance he crawled or the severity of every injury. While historians continue to debate certain details, the central facts remain extraordinary. He survived a devastating grizzly bear attack. He endured weeks in the wilderness with catastrophic injuries, and he reached safety against overwhelming odds. Even without embellishment, Hugh Glass's experience ranks among the greatest survival stories in American history. The story of Hugh Glass is not remembered because he defeated nature. Nature left permanent scars. Instead, he is remembered because he demonstrated remarkable resilience. His experience illustrates the realities of life on the 19th century American frontier, where survival depended on knowledge, adaptability, and determination. Historians continue to study his story because it offers insight into the fur trade, frontier exploration, and the challenges faced by early trappers. His survival has become a symbol of endurance under extreme circumstances. Nearly 200 years after the grizzly attack of 1823, Hugh Glass remains one of the most remarkable figures in frontier history. His life reminds us that history is often more compelling than fiction. A man believed to be beyond saving refused to surrender. He crawled through hundreds of miles of unforgiving wilderness. He recovered. He confronted those who had abandoned him, and he returned to the frontier he knew so well. While legends have added dramatic details over the years, the verified facts are astonishing enough on their own. Hugh Glass's greatest victory was not over a bear, another man, or the wilderness. It was over despair. His story continues to inspire historians, explorers, survival experts, and readers around the world because it demonstrates the extraordinary resilience of the human spirit. Sometimes the greatest heroes are not those who conquer the impossible, but those who simply refuse to give up.